Hello everyone, I'm Jalon Morgan from A Cast of Geeks, and this is my spoiler-free review of Rogue One, a Star Wars story. While The Force Awakens had the grave burden of ushering in a new era of Star Wars films to both longtime and returning fans, Rogue One has its own formidable task of being the first Star Wars film to not be an entry into the Skywalker saga. Furthermore, Rogue One is LucasFilm's first of what they describe as standalone stories, meaning that they are self-contained stories set in the Star Wars universe. Essentially, this means that unlike Episode 7, which was tasked with setting up a new trilogy and possibly even more films, Rogue One has the ability to exist on its own merit, while also serving as a prequel to Episode 4, A New Hope, as it tells the story of the Rebel Alliance's acquisition of the Death Star plans. For this reason, this film is a huge deal, as it is the first Star Wars film to not heavily rely on a Skywalker. Star Wars fans have known that this approach could work for years, as there have been countless books and video games set in corners of the galaxy that have been widely successful. Nonetheless, seeing a film take on this approach is triumphant. As aforementioned, Rogue One is not beholden to continuing the Star Wars saga. Because of this, there are two primary liberties that Rogue One is able to take that really allow it to shine. First, Rogue One is not tasked with setting up any future movies, meaning new characters are not introduced in this movie only for their arc to continue to develop in later movies. Therefore, all new characters are there to serve the film's narrative and nothing more. No characters are merely setups for future installments. Accordingly, this movie makes for a fantastic standalone story. This really hasn't been the case with any other Star Wars movie, excluding A New Hope, which Lucas wasn't sure would succeed at a scale grand enough to warrant sequels. Second, Rogue One's standalone nature allows it to break free of conventional Star Wars tropes and visual themes. Unlike The Force Awakens, which was often slavishly beholden to its homage to A New Hope, Rogue One really delineates itself from other Star Wars movies and does so from its very opening. Dawn is the opening crawl. Yeah, you heard that correctly. At first, I was taken aback by this choice, but I quickly realized that this was the film's way of making a statement. This is not your traditional Star Wars film. So much is unique about this film: the tone, the framing of the shots, the score, and even the lack of wiping transitions. I applaud the way it differentiates itself from other Star Wars films, all the while still feeling like classic Star Wars. If you can't tell by now, there's a lot to love about Rogue One, and I do. I love this film. The film is wildly successful in its two main goals: enhancing the original trilogy and being a great standalone story. Beginning with the film's ability to enhance the original trilogy, Rogue One should be the new standard that all other prequels should aspire to be. Because we spent so much time with our protagonists in the original trilogy, a sense of scale was hard to establish, meaning it was hard to get a bearing on the extent that the Empire's forces outmatched the Rebels. This movie does a phenomenal job of showing us insight into the Empire's infrastructure and fortitude. One scene in particular shows a Rebel squadron starkly contrasted with the entrance of several TIE fighters. It really shows you the extent that the Rebels were outnumbered. In essence, Rogue One gives context regarding the Empire's dominance and stranglehold on the galaxy. We see the Empire's presence on certain planets and their mining of resources necessary for the Death Star. Next, Rogue One enhances the original trilogy by, without going into spoilers, helping fill plot holes in A New Hope that nerds like me have been pondering for years. There are also several ancillary references to the original trilogy for those enthralled in the Star Wars saga. In short, Rogue One has given me a greater appreciation for the original trilogy. I could go back and watch A New Hope right now, and there are certain things that would mean more to me now than they did before I saw Rogue One. As aforementioned, Rogue One also succeeds as a self-contained story. It does so by retaining the feeling of Star Wars while also extending itself into new territories for the franchise. This is even evident by the look of the film. Scenes are framed differently from past installments, and the look and feel is very, very different. The film also delves into much darker themes regarding war and the sacrifices of war, more so than previous Star Wars films. Accordingly, the film employs a grotesque and grimy look that lends itself well to the film's major theme. This approach also extends itself into the film's narrative, as no longer is the Rebel Alliance White Knights raging against the darkness of the Empire. For the first time, ambiguity is introduced. We see our heroes do reprehensible things, but for a good cause. Particularly, Diego Luna's character, Cassian, is filled with gray area. Meanwhile, it also becomes apparent that not everyone working in accordance with the Empire is a mustache-twirling villain. Some do it out of fear, while others do it because of force. The added nuance to this dynamic is refreshing, and one of the movie's great strengths. Rogue One also does a phenomenal job of expanding the Star Wars mythology. In fact, the first 20 minutes of this film contain more new planets than the entirety of The Force Awakens. These unique locales help the film feel very different. With each jump to a new setting, on-screen text, something not previously used in the Star Wars franchise, help you orient yourself. This too is a cue that this is not your typical Star Wars film. This is a bona fide action film. I also love this film narratively. While the film is a bit uneven, with its first half feeling a bit discombobulated, its second half really hits its stride for me. The second half has a much nicer flow with a good amount of set pieces that really wow. The film's new characters were particularly impressive. The rapport between Felicity Jones's Jyn and Diego Luna's Cassian were especially of note. By the end, even though I knew the outcome of the film because of the film it precedes, I was totally invested in those characters and their mission. Also of note is Alan Tudyk's wisecracking reprogrammed Imperial droid, K2SO. His character serves as the comic relief for the film and often stole whatever scene he was in. Ben Mendelsohn, who I've always loved in Bloodline, is also great in this one, as he is both driven and a methodical antagonist. From a technical perspective, I was also wowed by this one. Like Edwards' other films, this film is beautifully shot with cinematographer Greg Fraser from Killing Them Softly and Zero Dark 30 fame doing a phenomenal job here. In fact, director Gareth Edwards should be commended, as he does a great job of establishing the film as being within the Star Wars universe, but just outside the main saga, a difficult balancing act to accomplish, to say the least. Edwards, who was given a poor script for his Godzilla reboot, has a great script here and gets great performances from his diverse cast. Felicity Jones, Diego Luna, Donnie Yen, Wen Zhang, Riz Ahmed, and Mads Mikkelsen are all fantastic here. It was particularly encouraging to see Donnie Yen finally be able to shine in action scenes in a film that is bound to make an innate amount of revenue. Mikkelsen from Hannibal seems to find a way to shine in any role he's given, and this one is no different, as I was left wishing that we had been given more of his character Jalon. Next, the film's writing is fantastic. Each character has a unique and interesting backstory that helps flesh them out and have us care for them. Each character also has a complete arc and journey they've made by the end of the film, which makes this a great self-contained story. The film's writing is also not slavishly beholden to fitting into the mold of any Star Wars film that came before it. As a result, the film is able to do unique things thematically. Finally, I would be amiss if I did not mention how dazzling the action scenes in this film are. Back are Imperial Star Destroyers, TIE Fighters, and even AT-ATs, and they are used to maximum effect here. Particularly, aerial battles in space are the best of the entire franchise. Some shots even appear as though the camera was mounted onto miniatures, which really makes those shots feel authentic. The film's final battle left me in awe and is one of the highlights of the entire Star Wars franchise for me. While I absolutely love this film, that is not to say that I did not have any qualms with it. As I mentioned earlier, the film is a little uneven, with the first act jumping between locales so frequently that it leaves you little time to become oriented in the universe. The film finds its footing somewhere in the second act and hits highs that are as high as any in the entire franchise. Finally, I found that the film often took some aspects from A New Hope a little too far. Without going into spoilers, I found 3 secondary characters to be used in a way that was distracting to the rest of the film. It was almost as though the filmmakers were unable to restrain themselves in the way that they used a few characters. While disappointing, this in no way ruined the film. In summary, Rogue One, a Star Wars story, ranks among the best Star Wars movies of all time. It masterfully delineates itself from other installments in the Skywalker saga, all the while retaining the feeling of a Star Wars film. It adds meaning to the film it precedes by fleshing out the Empire and explaining plot holes in A New Hope. As a standalone film, its narrative is largely successful despite a weak first act. The film's new characters shine, along with the cinematography and awe-inspiring action sequences. Those are my thoughts on Rogue One, a Star Wars story. What did you guys think of Rogue One? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more videos like this one.